This week we're going to be talking about the family, household diversity, and relationships. So kind of what I've been doing for my series, I'll be kind of introducing what the family is, and then moving on into theories, and then we'll talk more about relationships, and then the different ways that families can be comprised. So this one is very relevant for a lot of us, since if you think back to learning about the agents of socialization, the family is one of the most important. So what does a family consist of to you, right? You might think about your own family, for instance, or perhaps you come from a place that you have complicated relationships with your family, or you didn't have a family growing up or something like that. The definition of a family can range very widely. For sociological purposes, our definition of a family is that it's a set of people, so two or more, and they're related in some way, shape, or form. So obviously the most common is going to be by blood or marriage, right? But it can also be through legally. So I guess marriage, you can say, is also legal or for spiritual reasons or whatever. But it can also be through a legal circumstance, such as through adoption. But a family can also be created due to some other agreed upon relationship. So people are kind of all for that. They agree on it. One of the main roles of the family is to, from a kind of a functionalist perspective, and we'll analyze this in the next video, but it's to share responsibility for reproduction and caring for members of society. I think it's really interesting too that we point out this latter half of what a family is, and this is a very bad color marker to use. I am sorry about that. So caring for members of society as well. So not just the people who are in your little family unit, so to speak, but also for everyone. And like I was saying before in my intro slide, this is one of the most impactful social institutions, just because if you think back to the family as well as to the sense of self chapter, where we learned about Piaget's stages of critical development and everything like that. You learn all of that from your family. So they are very impactful, influential. It's where you get a lot of your ideas from growing up until you make it out into the real world, so to speak. So that's an aspect of the family. Now, families have changed across time and culture, and one of the things that you hear a lot in mainstream media or just in general is this concept of the nuclear family. And basically, the nuclear family is, I call it the stereotypical family, is where you have your married couple and then unmarried children together. So you have your mom, your dad, for instance, and then kids. And within this, I call it a unit, but within this family, it creates an interdependency because you are being reliant upon one another, but it's also unique because it makes the people within that family feel more self-sufficient. Well, can't say that. When they're kind of growing older. So there's that unique paradox of interdependency, but also becoming more self-sufficient. At least that's what a family is supposed to teach you, their children. You know, the children rely on you, and then as they grow, they're supposed to learn how to kind of live off on their own, and then they can, quote unquote, leave the nest, so to speak. And mobility also impacts the family quite a lot, and both physically and socially. And if you recall, mobility, thinking about social or economic mobility, depending on the types of jobs that people have, that'll impact the quality of life that that family in particular has, going back to that about the family on their own, as well as just the physical health of the family too. That greatly impacts the relationships that are created and sustained, maintained, or maybe even perhaps complicated in a family. And nuclear families are generally seen in an industrial, mobile, urban, and interdependent society. However, this type of family, as the mass media has been suggesting, um, it is decreasing, so to speak, as divorce rates. People can divorce, or depending on, it depends on the society that you're living in as well. But thinking about it from an American point of view, thinking about the availability of divorce, which we'll get into later on in this chapter, um, the number of single parent households. But regarding this particular type of family, it's only roughly about 30% of families fit this particular model. So even though it may seem common, if you think about your favorite TV shows, perhaps they have a nuclear family, it's not as common as you might think. So that's something that's kind of interesting, at least I think, about thinking about the family and how we all live in a unique way. And your book has this in figure 12.1 and also examines the living arrangements for adults 18 and older. You'll notice for this chapter in particular, I have a lot of research for you guys. That's because I was just feeling in a research kind of mood. Getting down to this is the second to last week of lectures for this this semester, and so just talking about all the theories again and again and again, I wanted to bring a little bit of relevancy in with this chapter in particular. So that's why we're going to have a lot of graphs and things like that. Plus, hopefully it'll help you guys out when you're doing your research projects and seeing all the different types of data out there. But for this chart, it's demonstrating how different people are living 18 or older. So the blue here, and for those of you who might not be able to see that, it is this one right here. I don't know why I'm in red. I'm sorry if you're colorblind. I hit black. There we go. So these two bars are the percentage of people 18 or older that are living with their spouse. And the group on the left is from the 60s, and then the group on the right is from 2017. And then on the right-hand side of each bar is all sorts of different types of living arrangements. So we have with an unmarried partner, a child of householder living alone, which you can kind of see how much that has grown just going from 10. And since these are both on the same graph, we can compare the percentages by just kind of drawing along. Sometimes the percentages on the left between two graphs are different, so make sure you are aware of that. Living with a child of a householder, that's about the same. And then all others have grown. And all others just include adults who live with maybe a parent, a roommate, sibling, foster child, grandchild, something that doesn't match being alone, child of householder, or unmarried partner. So you can kind of see how more complicated living arrangements have occurred just within the last 50, a little bit more than 50 years now, since this is a little bit older data, but which is just fascinating from a sociological standpoint because we're able to analyze from a historical lens, from my historical folks. We're able to analyze it from a health lens, from my health people out there, my carpenters and all my trades guys who are attending these lectures. You can really just see just how all of that, our living arrangements can really have an effect on all of that regarding ability to have health care, or if we're not living with our spouse and we're living alone, that means we have more houses that need to be built or more apartment complexes and things like that. So a whole different types of things that we need. Or for my engineers out there, thinking about if you're living in the city or if you're living away, and if you're living alone, how does that kind of impact the resources that you're using? And then for my environmental people out there, the resources are we using? Are they renewable? So all this kind of relates to everybody in some way, shape, or form. Okay. So the nuclear family is one type of family, and then another one that is commonly talked about is the extended family. And what occurs with that is these are relatives who live in the same home as parents and children. So if you have grandma and grandpa living with you, if you have some aunts, cousins, uncles, excuse me, anything like that, that would be called an extended family. And thinking about an extended family, this permits a larger economic unit than a typical family because you have most likely more people, more mouths to feed, but also, and thinking about it, you have more workers as well. So, and that's where the agricultural and more rural societies, this is why they're more common, because if you have more people, you could have more workers and get more work done theoretically. And thinking about just the pandemic and how that has affected everyone, your book starts the chapter off with another type of family that's kind of occurring nowadays, which they term the accordion family, which is where children of parents, they kind of go away for college and then they move back in with their parents and then they leave and then they move back. And it's kind of like an accordion due to the stretch of expansion and then kind of going back in and out. So a kind of interesting thing to think about is how has COVID affected the family? Perhaps you have been quarantined with your family a lot during the past year, just due to the different government shutdowns or depending on how you've been encountering the virus, if you have, or anything like that. How have your relationships changed due to COVID-19 in the family? How do you think you can expand these to learn more about the families that are surrounding your own community, the state, as well as just nationwide too? So that's something to really think about. And in examining more this accordion family, so to speak, and kids living at home with their parents, and not just due to COVID either, but I was just curious just to see what was going on, just in general, but also with COVID. But and this is just from July statistics. I haven't really looked into. I couldn't get anything for more recent, but you can kind of see that each dot is the percentage of 18 to 29-year-olds. That's the age range that they're looking at, who are living with a parent. And so you can kind of see here how, I don't know why I don't have the years. I kind of got cut off, my bad on that. But you can kind of see just even thinking about the pandemic. So here's February 2020 at 47%. And then by July, it jumped up to 52% of 18 to 29-year-olds in the US are living with a parent. So within February, March, April, May, June, so within 5 months, the percentage point between the two jumped 5%, which is that's like 1% per month, which is, from a statistical standpoint, pretty, I don't want to say significant because it means something in statistics, but that's pretty impressive, so to speak, with that jump, and which makes sense due to COVID and how maybe some of you had siblings or something like that were away for college, but then the college closed their dorms, so they had to move back in with their parents, that kind of thing. And then with everybody, a lot of people being virtual, that kind of makes people want to move home as well. So we haven't really seen these statistics as high as you can kind of see in this graph since the Great Depression. So almost 100 years ago, which is very crazy to think about. And then this is also just examining that 5% point change and just seeing between February 2020 and July 2020 how things have changed due to the pandemic and other financial reasons, and just more of a basic demographic layout. So we have everybody, but then we can also zoom in a little bit with our statistics and seeing if we break it down due to age, what is it, younger young adults, or is it older young adults that are living in with their parents? And we can kind of see there's an 8% change with the 18 to 24 range. So around that traditional college age, which makes sense. Has there been an increase in men and women? And that's basically about the same. Percentage-wise, and this is something that you have to think about too, is where does each category start, right? If you want to say, well, more men are staying at home than women, you would be correct, but they were staying at home more before the pandemic, in February 2020 as well. So you have to think about that too. And then thinking about it via race is also pretty fascinating. If you kind of just think about how culturally and how families are important in different cultures and things like that, how these percentage points are already high, like for Hispanics, and that hasn't changed much. It's only a 3%. And Hispanics have a very high family ties are extremely important to them. And then you can kind of see with different geographical regions for my geographic people, how that has kind of changed, in addition to the type of city, but also where in the US, which I thought was a very interesting thing that they included on this chart here, and seeing how the different sections of the US and how they've been impacted by living with a parent. I thought it was very interesting just to see overall that the Northeast has a lot of people who live with their parents. And even in February 2020, it's still higher than back in July 2020 for the rest of them. So that's just something that I thought was pretty interesting. Hopefully this chart was interesting to you too. And then in thinking about different family structures, so I think I said family structures regarding nuclear and extended families. There are also different family structures in regards to more of the cultural side of things, as well as the power structure and just the line of descent of how you examine things. So regarding, and this is just a random term that I couldn't really fit in on another slide, but thinking about kinship, since a lot of people, when you talk about family, they talk about their kin, and that's just being related to other people. So if you hear people say they're my kin or something like that, sociologically speaking, we just say that they're related. So you're related in some way, shape, or form. It could be by blood, by marriage, but it could also just be by the strength of your relationship as well. For instance, my family is extremely small, so I say that I have my dad's best friend as part of my kinship, because I see him as more of an uncle to me, like that kind of figure. So, and in thinking about our different family structures and how you can view them, you can kind of see there's 3 different ways of doing so. So the first one is seeing it from the lines of descent. So for you family history people out there, or if you're interested in your own genealogy, you probably know a little bit about something like this. And this is just examining the history, or just seeing how people were impacted based on the mother or the father. So if you're going through patrilineal descent, that is more in terms of line and examining the father's kind of family tree. So if you have your mother and your father and then you, it's kind of what a family tree looks like, but not really. And then you just basically go and see the father's side. And typically what they'll do is they'll start with the father and they go to the father's father and just examine the father's side. But you can just do the whole entire tree of the father as well. And then from a matrilineal aspect, you would take the mom's side. Let's see. Or female. This female is a little bit more correct, but and then you go through that side. However, if you wanted to just see both of them, you would just take both descent into viewpoint. And in thinking about descent, this was very important way back in the day when who you are and where your family came from was extremely important. So back in the day when people were meeting people, they really wanted to be impressive and you would need to know, oh, well, their father's family has been here for generations. They've been very established, they're very rich, whatever. Or if you kind of think of your Downton Abbey and how we have like the lord of the estate and how that line of descent is passed through the boys and they kind of get concerned because their heir has died and now they don't know the new heir in season 1. It's kind of something like that. That's patrilineal descent that's passed down through the male side of the family. However, if you want to look through the matrilineal side of things, that side was very important in terms of like for having children, so like breeding or the maternal care and that kind of thing. However, here in the U.S., that doesn't really matter. That's kind of one of the good quote-unquote parts of the U.S. nowadays. I mean, back in the 20s, where you came from still kind of had to play, but not so much anymore. We look at both of your sides of your family tree and kind of examine it, and they're equally important. The dad side isn't more important than the mom side. The mom side isn't more important than the dad. So they're just equally important, and you are important. So that's basically how the bilateral aspect is. And thinking about it in terms of culture, if you take a more patrilocal, custom, not culture, my bad. But if you have cultures that have been passed down through your patriarchal side of the family, through your dad's side, that would be more of a patrilocal instance. Or if you have traditions that have been passed down through your mother's side of her generations and her ancestry, those are matrilocal customs. But sometimes you create your own customs, you create your own family traditions, and that's something that's called neolocal customs. So if your family does something, that's a tradition for you guys that none of the rest of their family trees do, that would be considered a neolocal. And also examining family structures, you can look at power and power structures. So this is where the patriarchy, the matriarchy kind of comes in. And it's basically who has authority. So if you think about your stereotypical man's the head of the household and they kind of are in charge of all the decisions and things like that, that's more of a patriarchal power structure there because it's the man who is making the decisions there. However, in contrast, matriarchy is where the women do. And it's very fascinating if you're interested in examining like hunting and gathering societies and things like that, because it's more of, some societies actually have more of a matriarchal power structure because the men were going away to hunt for things, whereas the women kind of stayed put because they were supposed to take care of the children. You know, some of them were in charge of planting and things like that, or gathering nearby. And so since the men were who knows how many 4 days away, the men couldn't make all the decisions, so the women did. So when the women are able to make a decision, that's what's called a matriarchal society. Men were also gone due to war and things like that as well. And so you can also kind of see that change in power structure thinking about war. If you think about World War II and how the men went away, and then the women started working in the factories and things like that. And after the war, the men wanted to go back to working in the factories, and the women were like, we actually like this, right? Which kind of turned into the women's movement. So just a slight tangent there. But and also examining authority patterns, you can also have an egalitarian family power. That is where both spouses have equal amounts of power. So not one person has all the power. Might be that one side makes decisions for one aspect of life and the other one is more towards the other aspects, but they work together. And this has been, and regarding sociologists in particular, we view this power structure where both of them have power, maybe not at the same time, but it's more of an equal distribution of it, as this power structure is overtaking that patriarchal or even matriarchal power structure. It's kind of similar to parenting, like what I talked about a couple weeks ago, and leading towards that more equal stance of parenting. Kind of similar here regarding power. Since this video is getting a little bit long, we're going to end it there. In this video, we learned what a family is according to sociology. Having two or more people could be related via blood, marriage, adoption, or some other arrangement. Learned about the different types of families, including nuclear, your stereotypical mom, dad, and kids. Extended, where aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents live under the same roof. As well as accordion families, which is what your textbook talks about in a snippet in the beginning chapter, where children kind of move in and out under their parents' roofs depending on the circumstances. And we kind of considered how that's related to our current situation with the COVID-19 pandemic. We also learned about the structures of family, examining the not so importance of descent nowadays within at least the US culture. However, in some other cultures, who or where your mother's ancestry and father's ancestry has come from is very important. Also examine the different customs of the family or making your own, but also the power structures that occur in family, which we're going to kind of consider a little bit more when we examine theories. Theories is going to be our next set of videos, so I look forward to seeing you, but not seeing you, in our next section. So I'll see you later.